Hi everyone, welcome back. I wanted to wait until everyone had finished the Tomatoland quiz before I posted this video. So today I just want to take a few minutes to summarize and synthesize what was discussed on the last Tomatoland discussion board, and then also to provide a bit of a transition or a bridge between the Module 2 on Tomatoland and Module 3 on Research Design. First of all, in regards to the discussion board, again, I am just so incredibly impressed with the level of discussion that students are having, and the exchanges are very productive and have given me, as well as the other students in the class, a lot of insight into what's important to students as we read this book. For many of you, reading Tomatoland was a very important and moving experience. So words that students used to express it were shocked, disgusted, overwhelmed, but also inspired to perhaps take action to address some of the issues that were raised in Tomatoland. And really, that's kind of the point for this class, and the way in which we are reading this book is not to become overwhelmed or depressed about what is a horrible situation, but to look at a problem, a social problem, and think about how we can take action to help address some of the issues raised in those social problems. And so I think that students started to pinpoint some of the main areas for positive work that could be done to deal with some of these issues. The first thing I wanted to say, though, is that if you haven't had a chance to look at the Campaign for Fair Food, that was the program that grew out of the penny per pound movement that's discussed in the book, just Google the Campaign for Fair Food or go to the Coalition of Immokalee Workers and look at the Campaign for Fair Food. And what you will discover is that this campaign is actually cited as one of the most successful labor organizing movements in modern times, and ended up ultimately bringing in most fast food and supermarket chains to participate in the Campaign for Fair Food, which led to a small increase in wages for workers in the tomato fields. But I would argue, more importantly, created a network and a coalition for social change. And so what the Campaign for Fair Food did, in addition to bringing in slight increase in wage, is it created a platform for talking and thinking about and protecting human rights among farm workers. So definitely take some time to check that out. And you know, when this book was written, that campaign was just getting started, and now, just a few years down the road, it's seen as quite successful. I had a chance to meet with Barry Estabrook last year when he came to Boise State, and people asked him, you know, is the problem solved? Have all the issues in the tomato fields been resolved? And the answer is no, but major progress has been made. But as many of you pointed out in your discussion boards, that the tomato fields are really just one small piece of our flawed agricultural industry. And so hopefully some of the awareness that's been done around the issue of tomatoes can help garner interest for people to look at issues in oranges and other produce, and in our meat industry. And many of you talked about some popular documentaries that you've seen, Food Inc. and others, that bring up many of the problems in the entire agricultural system. So as you move forward, I want you to start thinking about what are tangible actions that we could do? What are tangible points of change that could happen? And to do that, at this point, I'd like you to start thinking about who's responsible for taking those actions. And some of you already started thinking about this in your first discussion post. And so I wanted to summarize the four main groups that students highlighted as potential actors for making improvements and taking action. So the first group are consumers. And so many students pointed out that consumers have a lot of power. They have the power of the dollar, and this would be one group that we could look at to bring about change. So by changing our shopping habits, looking at farmers markets, organic food, local agriculture, we have the ability to affect a lot of change. Another group that students pointed out is the government. So especially looking at regulations. So how could we increase regulation of pesticides, regulation of farm worker conditions, and more broadly, regulation regarding immigration. So we hear a lot of talk about immigration reform and thinking about what role could the government play in improving some of the problems that we see in Tomatoland. A third potential group for action would be what's broadly referred to as civil society. So nonprofit organizations, church groups, food banks, lots of different organizations that have risen to the challenge of addressing poverty, education, access to information. There are some really great groups that work down on the U.S.-Mexico border who educate undocumented immigrants and really just stand down on the border and try to tell people what the reality of the situation is that they are entering. So there's a real role for civil society and nonprofit organizations. And lastly, the fourth group that we could look at would be farm workers themselves. So what role can farm workers play in organizing, perhaps through unions or through campaigns like the Fair Food Campaign and the Coalition of Immokalee Workers? And as you start to look at which groups can affect change, what you'll probably discover is that there's a lot of space for interaction and overlap and different groups coming together and perhaps in some sort of coalition or collaborative movement that we could start to see real change. So as you move forward and think about how we create solutions to some of these problems, those are some of the groups or the coalitions that could come together to work on some of these issues. And as we move into the next module of the course, our research design, and you get in your groups and you start to work on developing your research projects, I want you to think in terms of actors and groups and how we affect change. So that leads us to Module 3, Research Design, and you will have a chance, some of you have already started working on your library projects to learn the mechanics of doing academic research, which I pointed out in the module. Different students are in radically different places in terms of doing library research, so each of you will be in a slightly different place as you work through those library worksheets. And by next weekend I will assign your research groups, and you should start working in your groups of 5, and you'll work from the Global Solutions project page, and the end product will be the production of a video. I'm really open to innovative ideas on approaches and methodologies, and you should definitely just check in with me as you start coming up with ideas for what your group wants to cover. And bounce ideas off of me, and I'm happy to work with each of you as we go through that process. The last thing I wanted to say is that I've talked with a couple of students about potentially maybe having a meetup for our class for students who are interested in some of the issues raised in Tomatoland, or immigration, farm worker rights. These are all things that I look at in my own research and teaching, and I would be happy to set up some kind of either a Google Hangout meeting, or for people who are in town, we could even do a class meetup somewhere on campus or in a coffee shop or something if people would like to meet to talk further about the issues that we are discussing right now. So keep up the good work, and I really enjoy reading the discussion board, and I look forward to reading the next discussion board. Thank you, and I hope to hear from you soon.